It was a chilly Tuesday morning, the kind where you can see your breath if you're standing outside for too long. Emily Carter tightened her scarf as she stepped onto the platform, clutching her coffee cup like it was her lifeline. She wasn't particularly excited about the day ahead, just another round of meetings, deadlines, and maybe grabbing takeout on her way home. Life, for Emily, had settled into a predictable rhythm over the years. Work, commute, sleep, repeat. But little did she know, this ordinary day would turn out to be anything but. The train arrived with its usual screech, and Emily hopped on, weaving through the crowd to find a spot. It wasn't easy. The car was packed, as it always was during rush hour. Finally, she managed to snag a window seat near the middle. Settling in, she pulled out her phone, scrolling absent-mindedly while sipping her lukewarm coffee. The rhythmic clatter of the train wheels against the tracks lulled her into thought, but just as she started zoning out, something caught her attention, a commotion near the door. A man, clearly flustered, was trying to keep his balance while holding onto two heavy bags and keeping a grip on the hand of a young boy. The child couldn't have been older than 6 or 7, dressed in a slightly oversized jacket that made him look even smaller. His wide eyes darted around the crowded train, searching for somewhere to sit, but every seat was taken. Emily watched them for a moment, feeling a pang of sympathy. The father looked exhausted, his face lined with worry, and the boy seemed unsure, gripping his dad's fingers tightly. They swayed with the motion of the train, struggling to stay upright. For a second, Emily hesitated. Giving up her seat meant standing for the rest of the ride, which wouldn't exactly be comfortable. Plus, no one else around her seemed eager to move. Everyone was either glued to their phones or pretending not to notice. But then she thought about how hard it must be for the man, juggling all those things at once while trying to protect his kid. She imagined herself in his shoes or anyone else's, really, and realized she'd want someone to step up if the roles were reversed. So, without overthinking it anymore, she stood up. "Here," she said, tapping the man lightly on the shoulder. He turned to her, surprised, as she gestured toward her seat. "You can take this." For a split second, he looked uncertain, almost like he didn't believe what he was hearing. Then, relief washed over his face. "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice low but filled with gratitude. "Yeah." "Go ahead," Emily replied with a small smile. "It's fine." The man nodded, mouthing a quick thank you before guiding the boy to the empty seat. As they sat down, the little boy looked up at Emily and grinned. It was such a genuine, heartfelt smile that it stopped her in her tracks. She found herself smiling back instinctively before moving further down the aisle to stand by the doors, leaning against the pole. Emily tried to shake off the moment. She told herself it was nothing, just a random act of kindness, something anyone could have done. Still, there was something about the way the boy had smiled at her, something warm and pure, that lingered in her mind. Maybe it was the innocence in his expression, or maybe it was the quiet satisfaction of knowing she'd done something nice. Whatever it was, it stuck with her. As the train rattled along, Emily glanced back occasionally, catching glimpses of the pair. The father leaned closer to the boy, talking softly, pointing out landmarks visible through the window. The boy listened intently, nodding and occasionally giggling at whatever story his dad was telling. Watching them together, Emily felt a strange mix of emotions. On one hand, there was happiness for them, for the bond they shared. On the other, there was a twinge of something else, harder to define: loneliness, longing. She couldn't quite put her finger on it. When the train finally reached her stop, Emily stepped off, already forgetting about the encounter as she got swept up in the hustle of the city streets. Little did she know, though, that this seemingly insignificant interaction would set off a chain of events she could never have anticipated. That single decision to give up her seat would ripple outward in ways she couldn't yet imagine, touching lives far beyond her own. And so, as Emily disappeared into the crowd, heading toward her office building, the seeds of change were quietly planted. What had started as a simple act of kindness would soon grow into something much bigger, reshaping her world in ways she couldn't foresee. All because she chose to stand instead of sit. A couple of weeks passed, and life went on as usual for Emily. The memory of the father and son on the train had faded into the background, becoming just another fleeting moment in her busy routine. She barely gave it a second thought until one morning, when fate decided to remind her. It was another chilly day, and Emily found herself back on the same train route, buried in a book this time instead of scrolling through her phone. Lost in the story, she barely noticed the familiar voice that broke through the hum of conversations around her. "Hey, you're the woman who gave us your seat last month." Startled, Emily looked up from her book to see the same man from before standing near her. He smiled warmly, recognition lighting up his face. Beside him stood the boy, now clutching a small toy car in one hand and holding onto his dad's coat with the other. Emily blinked, taken aback for a moment before recognition dawned on her too. "Oh. Hi," she said, closing her book and sitting up straighter. "I didn't expect to see you again." The man chuckled lightly. "Small world, huh? I've been meaning to thank you properly ever since that day." "You really saved us." Emily waved off the compliment with a modest laugh. "It wasn't a big deal. Anyone would have done the same." But the man shook his head firmly. "Not everyone would have. Trust me, I know. Most people pretend they don't notice, or they're too caught up in their own stuff. What you did, it meant a lot to us." His words made Emily pause. She hadn't thought much about it after the fact, but hearing him say it like that made her feel good. Like maybe she'd made more of an impact than she realized. "I'm glad I could help," she replied sincerely. Then, feeling curious, she added, "So, do you take this train often?" He nodded. "Yeah, pretty much every weekday. My job's downtown, so this is the easiest way to get there. Plus, it gives me some time with my boy in the mornings." He glanced down at the child, who was now inspecting the toy car with intense concentration. "We try to make the most of these little moments, you know?" Emily smiled at that. There was something endearing about the way he spoke about his son, the obvious pride and love in his tone. It reminded her of how rare it was to find people who truly cherished the small things in life. "Well, I'm glad I ran into you again," she said. "And if you ever need anything or even just want to grab coffee sometime, let me know. We live nearby." The offer came out casually, almost reflexively, but it seemed to catch the man off guard. For a brief moment, he looked surprised, then grateful. "That's really kind of you," he said, smiling again. "I might actually take you up on that. Thanks." With that, the train pulled into his stop, and he gave her a quick wave before stepping off with his son. Emily watched them go, feeling a strange sense of warmth settle over her. It was a nice interaction, nothing more, but it left her with a lingering curiosity. Who was this man? And why did she feel like she wanted to know more? Fast forward a few days, and Emily found herself thinking about the encounter more often than she expected. Maybe it was the kindness in the man's eyes, or the way he talked about his son with such affection. Whatever it was, it stuck with her. That evening, after a particularly long and stressful day at work, she found herself staring at her phone, debating whether to send him a message. She hesitated at first, unsure if it would come across as weird or intrusive. But then she remembered how genuine he'd seemed, how open he'd been during their conversation. Taking a deep breath, she typed out a simple text. "Hey, it's Emily. Just wanted to check in and see how you and your son are doing." She hit send before she could overthink it, then immediately regretted it. What if he thought she was being pushy? Or worse, what if he didn't remember her at all? To her relief, he replied within minutes. "Hi, Emily. Wow, this is unexpected, but nice. We're doing well. Thanks for asking. How about you?" They exchanged a few more messages that night, mostly casual chit-chat about work, hobbies, and life in general. By the end of the conversation, Emily felt lighter somehow, like a weight she hadn't realized she was carrying had been lifted. Talking to him was easy, comfortable, in a way she hadn't experienced in a long time. Over the next few weeks, their interactions became more frequent. At first, it was just texts here and there, but soon they started meeting up for coffee. Their conversations flowed effortlessly, bouncing between lighthearted topics and deeper reflections on life. Emily learned that the man had been raising his son alone since losing his wife a few years earlier. Despite the hardships, he remained optimistic, determined to give his boy the best life possible, For Emily, these meetings were refreshing. She enjoyed hearing stories about the adventures he and his son went on, their weekend hikes, impromptu picnics, and late-night stargazing sessions. It was clear that despite the challenges, they shared a bond that was unbreakable. In return, Emily opened up about her own life. She told him about her job, her dreams of traveling someday, and the loneliness she sometimes felt living in the city. He listened intently, offering advice and encouragement when she needed it most. Slowly but surely, their friendship grew stronger, filling gaps in both their lives that neither of them had realized were there. One afternoon, while sipping coffee at a cozy cafe, Emily found herself watching him interact with his son over video call. The boy waved enthusiastically at her, shouting, "Hi, Miss Emily," before launching into a detailed explanation of his latest Lego creation. Emily couldn't help but laugh, charmed by his energy and enthusiasm. "You've got quite the fan." "Club?" she teased, glancing at the man with a grin. He laughed too, shaking his head. "Yeah, he talks about you all the time. Says you're super cool." Emily felt a rush of affection for the boy and for the man sitting across from her. In that moment, she realized something important. This wasn't just a casual friendship anymore. It had evolved into something deeper, something meaningful. And as scary as that thought might have been, it also felt right. Little by little, Emily began to let her guard down, allowing herself to imagine a future where she wasn't just an observer of this family's joy, but a part of it. As the weeks turned into months, Emily's friendship with the man and his son grew stronger in ways she hadn't anticipated. What started as casual coffee meetings evolved into shared dinners, weekend outings, and even holiday gatherings. It wasn't just about catching up anymore. It felt like they were building something real, something lasting. For Emily, who had spent years prioritizing independence and self-reliance, this new dynamic was both surprising and deeply fulfilling. One Saturday morning, the three of them decided to go on a hike together. The weather was perfect, crisp air, golden sunlight filtering through the trees, and just enough of a chill to make hot chocolate afterwards sound irresistible. The boy bounded ahead, full of energy, while Emily and the man walked side by side, chatting easily about everything from childhood memories to their hopes for the future. At one point, the trail narrowed, forcing them to walk single file. Emily took the lead, glancing back occasionally to check on the boy, who was now pretending to be an explorer discovering hidden treasures beneath rocks and logs. "He's got such a big imagination," she remarked with a smile, slowing down. "So the man could catch up." "Yeah, he gets that from his mom," the man replied softly, his voice tinged with nostalgia. "She used to love coming up with these wild stories for him when he was little." Emily hesitated for a moment, unsure if she should ask more. She knew bits and pieces of his story, that his wife had passed away, but she didn't want to pry. Sensing her hesitation, he continued, "She loved adventures, big and small. Even simple things like baking cookies or planting flowers in the backyard. She'd turn into this grand production. He still talks about her sometimes, you know? Asks questions I don't always have answers for." His words hung in the air between them, heavy but not uncomfortable. Emily nodded slowly, her heart aching for him and for the boy, who was too young to fully understand what he'd lost. "I can tell how much you loved her," she said finally, choosing her words carefully. "And how much you still do. That's really beautiful." He looked at her then, his eyes soft with gratitude. "Thanks," he murmured. "It's been hard, but having him, it keeps me going. And lately," he paused, searching for the right words, "lately meeting someone like you has made it easier. You've been amazing with him, and honestly, with me too." Emily felt her cheeks flush, caught off guard by the sincerity in his voice. She shrugged lightly, brushing off the compliment. "I'm just happy to help. You're doing an incredible job raising him." "Anyone can see that." The rest of the hike passed in comfortable silence, punctuated by the boy's occasional shouts of excitement whenever he found another treasure. When they reached the summit, they sat together on a rocky outcrop, taking in the breathtaking view of rolling hills and distant mountains. For a moment, none of them spoke. They simply enjoyed the quiet companionship, the kind that doesn't need filling with words. Back home later that evening, Emily couldn't stop thinking about the day. There was something about the way the man opened up to her, sharing parts of himself he clearly didn't share with everyone, that touched her deeply. She admired his strength, his ability to keep moving forward despite the pain of losing someone so important to him. And the boy, he was a constant reminder of resilience, of finding joy even after loss. But what struck Emily most was how natural it all felt. Being around them didn't feel like stepping into someone else's world. It felt like coming home. She realized she hadn't felt that sense of belonging in a long time. Sure, she had friends and colleagues, but there was always a distance, a barrier she kept up to protect herself. With them, though, those walls crumbled effortlessly. Over the next few months, Emily became a regular part of their lives. She helped the man navigate parenting challenges, offering advice on everything from school projects to bedtime routines. She joined them for movie nights, laughing until her sides hurt at the boys' hilarious commentary during animated films. She even stepped in to help organize birthday parties and plan surprise outings, earning herself the unofficial title of favorite honorary aunt. For the boy, Emily quickly became a source of comfort and fun. He adored her, often asking when she'd visit next or insisting she stay longer whenever she came over. One afternoon, while coloring pictures at the kitchen table, he looked up at her with wide, earnest eyes and said, "Miss Emily, will you always be here?" The question caught her off guard, tugging at her heartstrings in a way she hadn't expected. She smiled gently, kneeling beside him. "Of course I will," she promised. "I'm not going anywhere." Seeing the relief on his face made her realize just how much she meant to him, and how much they meant to her. She wasn't just helping them fill gaps in their family. They were filling gaps in hers too. Without realizing it, she had become part of something bigger than herself. A team, a unit, a makeshift family bound together by love and trust. Despite the growing closeness, Emily couldn't shake the nagging fear in the back of her mind. Was she getting too attached? Was it fair to the boy to let him grow fond of her only for her presence to fade someday? These doubts surfaced occasionally, especially late at night when she lay awake replaying moments from their time together. One evening, she confided in the man about her worries. They were sitting on his porch, sipping tea under a blanket of stars. The boy was already asleep inside, exhausted from a day spent playing soccer with neighborhood kids. I don't want to mess things up," Emily admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "What if I disappoint him? Or what if I can't live up to whatever role he thinks I play in his life?" The man listened patiently, letting her finish before responding. "You're not going to disappoint him," he said firmly. "If anything, you've given him something incredibly valuable, a sense of stability, of being cared for unconditionally. That's not something he takes for granted." He paused, looking at her with a mixture of admiration and affection. "And as for roles? You don't have to figure everything out right now. Just be yourself. Be present. That's enough." His words eased some of the tension she'd been carrying, replacing it with a quiet confidence. Maybe she didn't have all the answers yet, but she knew one thing for certain: she wanted to be there. For them, for both of them, for as long as they'd have her as they sat there under the stars. Emily felt a profound sense of peace wash over her. Life had thrown her a curveball, leading her to this unexpected friendship-turned-family. And while she couldn't predict what the future held, she knew one thing: she wouldn't trade this connection for anything in the world. The bond between Emily, the man, and his son continued to deepen as the months rolled by. Their lives intertwined in ways that felt seamless, like threads weaving together to form a tapestry of shared experiences. Emily wasn't just an occasional visitor anymore. She had become part of their daily rhythm. She helped with homework, cheered at soccer games, and even baked cookies for school bake sales. For the boy, she was no longer Miss Emily, but simply Emily, or sometimes, when he was feeling particularly affectionate, Mom Emily. It started one snowy afternoon when they were decorating the Christmas tree together. The boy, bundled up in a sweater 2 sizes too big, handed her an ornament and said matter-of-factly, "You're like my mom now, right?" His tone was so earnest, so innocent that it stopped Emily mid-motion. She looked at him, unsure how to respond. Before she could say anything, the man chuckled softly from across the room. "Well, if anyone deserves the title, it's her," he said with a warm smile. The boy nodded enthusiastically as if the matter was settled. And though Emily laughed it off, brushing it aside with a playful comment about being promoted to cookie maker in chief, the word stayed with her long after the evening ended. That night, lying in bed, she replayed the moment over and over in her mind. What did it mean to step into such a role? Could she truly fill that space without overshadowing the memory of the boy's mother? These questions swirled in her head, leaving her restless yet oddly hopeful. One crisp February evening, after weeks of unusually heavy snowfall, Emily found herself walking home with the man and his son. They'd spent the day sledding at a nearby park, laughing until their cheeks hurt from the cold and their stomachs ached from laughter. As they approached their front door, the boy ran ahead, eager to show off his latest sled trick inside. But the man lingered behind, pulling Emily aside gently. "I need to talk to you about something," he said, his voice steady but tinged with nervousness. Emily frowned slightly, sensing the seriousness in his tone. "Okay, what is it?" He hesitated, shuffling his feet in the snow before finally meeting her gaze. "I've been thinking about this for a while now, and I didn't want to rush it. But every time I try to imagine the future, I see you there, with us." Her heart skipped a beat. She stared at him, unsure whether to laugh, cry, or both. He pressed on, his words tumbling out faster now. "You've done so much for us, for me and for him. You've made our lives brighter, easier, happier, and I can't help but wonder, where do we go from here? Because I don't want to lose you. Not ever." Emily felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes, though she tried to blink them away. This was the last thing she'd expected, a confession, raw and unfiltered, on a quiet winter night. She opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. Instead, she reached for his hand, gripping it tightly as if to anchor herself. "I feel the same way," she admitted quietly. "Being with you and your son, it's changed everything for me. I didn't know I needed this kind of connection until I found it with you too." Relief washed over his face, followed quickly by a grin so wide it lit up the dimly lit street. "Does that mean—" he began, trailing off as if afraid to finish the thought. "Yes," Emily interrupted, her own smile breaking through. "Yes, it does." They stood there for a moment, holding hands and grinning like teenagers, before heading inside to join the boy. When they walked in, he looked up from his coloring book, curiosity sparkling in his eyes. "What took you guys so long?" he asked innocently. The man exchanged a glance with Emily, then knelt down to the boy's level. "We were talking about something important," he explained. "Something that affects all three of us." The boy tilted his head, intrigued. "What is it?" "Well," the man said, glancing at Emily again, "we think it's time we made things official. Your Mom Emily might actually become Mom Emily for real." The boy's jaw dropped, his eyes widening in disbelief. Then, without warning, he leapt into Emily's arms, hugging her so tightly she almost lost her balance. "Really?" he squealed, his voice muffled against her coat. "For real? For real?" "For real, for real," Emily confirmed, hugging him back just as fiercely. Her throat tightened as she realized the magnitude of what they were committing to, not just a relationship with the man, but a lifelong promise to the boy who had already stolen her heart. In the weeks that followed, their dynamic shifted once again. The man proposed properly during a spring picnic, presenting Emily with a simple ring that sparkled in the sunlight. It wasn't flashy or extravagant, but it symbolized everything they'd built together: love, trust, and a shared commitment to creating a life filled with joy and purpose. The boy cheered louder than anyone when Emily said yes, spinning around in circles and declaring it the best day ever. Planning the wedding became a family affair. The boy insisted on designing invitations, which featured stick figure drawings of the three of them, and Emily worked closely with the man to ensure every detail reflected their journey. There were no grand gestures or elaborate displays, just heartfelt moments that celebrated their unique bond. On the day of the ceremony, held outdoors under a canopy of blooming flowers, the boy proudly carried the rings down the aisle, stumbling slightly but earning thunderous applause from the small gathering of friends and family. As Emily stood beside the man, holding his hand and gazing out at the smiling faces around them, she felt a profound sense of gratitude. This wasn't just a wedding, it was the beginning of a new chapter, one she never could have imagined when she gave up her train seat all those months ago. In his speech, the man reflected on their unlikely meeting, thanking Emily not only for changing their lives, but also for reminding him that love has no boundaries. "Sometimes," he said, raising his glass, "the smallest acts of kindness lead to the biggest blessings. And for that I'll always be grateful." Tears streamed down Emily's face as she listened, overwhelmed by the weight of his words. She knew life wouldn't always be perfect. There would still be challenges, sacrifices, and moments of doubt, but she also knew one thing for certain. Together, they could face anything. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the celebration, Emily realized that giving up her seat on that crowded train had been more than just a random act of kindness. It had been the first step toward building a family, a real, messy, beautiful family that would forever change her life. The wedding day came and went, leaving behind a trail of laughter, love, and memories that would last a lifetime. Emily woke up the next morning in a cozy bed she now shared with her husband, sunlight streaming through the curtains and the faint smell of pancakes wafting upstairs. Downstairs, the boy, now officially her stepson, was already at the kitchen table, eagerly flipping pages of his favorite comic book while waiting for breakfast. "Good morning, Mom, Emily," he called out cheerfully when he saw her walk in. The nickname still made her smile every time she heard it, though it had grown less formal over the months. Now it was simply Mom, said with the same ease and affection he used when talking to his dad. Emily kissed the top of his head before pouring herself a cup of coffee. "Morning, champ. What's on the agenda today?" He shrugged, grinning mischievously. "I don't know. Maybe we can build a fort, or go to the park, or both." She laughed, glancing at her husband, who was busy flipping pancakes on the stove. "Looks like we've got our work cut out for us." As they sat down together to eat, Emily felt a wave of contentment wash over her. This was what family looked like, not perfect, not without its challenges, but real. Every meal, every argument, every inside joke added another layer to the foundation they were building together. It wasn't always easy, but it was worth it. Life moved forward in a rhythm that felt familiar yet new. Emily adjusted to her role as a mother figure, learning to balance discipline with patience, guidance with freedom. There were days when the boy tested her limits, pushing boundaries just to see how far he could go. On those days, she reminded herself of something her husband often said: parenting isn't about being perfect, it's about showing up, and show up she did. Whether it was helping him practice multiplication tables late into the evening, or sitting beside him during thunderstorms when he couldn't sleep, Emily gave everything she had to make sure he felt loved and supported. In return, he gave her unconditional trust, a gift she cherished more than anything else. One summer afternoon, as they lounged in the backyard after lunch, the boy looked up at her thoughtfully. "You know," he began, squinting against the bright sun, "you're really good at this mom stuff." Emily raised an eyebrow, amused. "Oh yeah, what makes you say that?" He shrugged, picking at a blade of grass. "I don't know. You just get me, I guess. Like, you know when I need space and when I need a hug, and you never yell unless it's super important." Her chest tightened at his words, and for a moment she didn't know how to respond. Finally, she reached out and ruffled his hair affectionately. "Well, thanks, kiddo. That means a lot coming from you." He grinned, satisfied, and went back to playing with the grass. But Emily sat there quietly, letting his words sink in. She hadn't realized until that moment just how much she'd grown, not just as a partner or a caregiver, but as a person. Being part of this family had taught her things she never thought. She'd learned how to be patient, how to let go of control, and most importantly, how to love deeply and unconditionally. Years passed, and their little family continued to thrive. They celebrated milestones together: birthdays, graduations, vacations, and weathered storms too. There were tough times, of course. Days when bills piled up, illnesses struck, or misunderstandings caused tension. But through it all, they leaned on each other, finding strength in their bond. One crisp autumn evening, as they gathered around the dinner table to mark the 5th anniversary of their wedding, Emily found herself reflecting on how far they'd come. The boy, now a lanky teenager with braces and a passion for basketball, sat across from her, cracking jokes that made everyone laugh. Her husband smiled warmly, raising his glass for a toast. "To us," he said, his voice filled with emotion. "To the family we built, one step at a time. None of this would have been possible without love, patience, and a whole lot of luck." Everyone clinked glasses, and Emily felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. As she glanced around the table at her husband's kind face, her son's infectious grin, and the warmth of their home surrounding them, she knew this was exactly where she was meant to be. Looking back, Emily often thought about that fateful morning on the train. Giving up her seat had seemed like such a small thing at the time, barely worth remembering. Yet that single act of kindness had set off a chain reaction, leading her to the people who would become her entire world. Sometimes life works in mysterious ways. A chance encounter can blossom into lifelong friendships. A simple gesture can open doors you never knew existed. And sometimes the smallest decisions, like choosing to stand instead of sit, can lead to the greatest adventures. For Emily, the journey had been unpredictable, challenging, and beautiful all at once. It had taught her that love isn't something you find. It's something you create, day by day, moment by moment. And as she sat there surrounded by the people she loved most, she knew one thing for certain: she wouldn't trade this life for anything in the world. Because in the end, it wasn't just about finding a family, it was about becoming one.